Don't say things. What you are, thunders so that I cannot hear what you say to the contrary. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Walker, I'm really happy for you. Over the course of the past several months you've made many good things happen. Your son Keith came into the world, you started a new job, you've stayed sober 7 months, you are serving your community again, playing a role in your church. It's all solid and strong. And you've started to lead again. You were always a leader in our class, a leader in the SEAL teams, and when you first came home you were a leader in your community. So let's spend a little time thinking about leadership. Resilient leadership is rooted in resilient living. Winston Churchill was a resilient leader. But to me it's more accurate to think of him as a resilient man who led. Same with Lincoln. Same with Harriet Tubman. Same with Claire Barton. They lived resilient lives. And they led. Let's always remember that resilient living is the foundation for resilient leadership. Let's also remember that, just as there are many ways to live a good and resilient life, there are many ways to lead effectively. In reading any set of essential traits of leaders, you're likely to run into one of two things. 1. You'll see that there are often as many exceptions to the rules as there are examples. Or 2, you'll find that the categories are defined so broadly as to be meaningless. A similar thing happens when people create a list of rules for leadership or living. I've found that life operates not by a series of rules, but by a set of consequences. What is true about how we live and lead is usually true only most of the time. Part of wisdom is knowing the exceptions to the rules. What is always true is that what you do will have consequences. With that in mind, there are still a few things worth special attention as we think about your resilient leadership. I remember reading Henry V in school. As far as Shakespeare goes, it doesn't get any better for a high school boy: action, adventure, battles, sword fighting. Of course, the really famous part, the part that people recognize even if they've never heard of the play, is the great speech that comes before the Battle of Agincourt. The phrase "band of brothers" comes from Henry V. Let me set the scene for you. And keep in mind that while this is a play, it's based on an actual battle. The English army, starving, soaked, exhausted, stands across the field from the army of France on the morning of a clash that will determine the fate of both nations. The English are outnumbered, and this part's a historical fact, by as much as 6-1. King Henry calls his army together, gets up on a tree stump, and tries to say something that will inspire his men. Remember, we're in the Middle Ages here. Everyone in that army believes that the king gets his power directly from God. When the king speaks, they are listening to God's representative on earth. So what does Henry say? Fight for your king, so I can conquer France. You should all be honored to die for your king. Your king commands you to run across that field. No. Here, according to Shakespeare, is what he says. He today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition. In other words, even if you are a 15-year-old peasant kid who'd never left the farm until the army came through, stuck a bow in your hands, and marched you to France, you can become royalty today. You can be the king's brother, a gentleman, a prince. And, Henry promises, no matter how vile, how sinful, how tortured your life has been, this day can make you great. Henry and his army won. Of course, Shakespeare made all of that up a couple of hundred years after the fact. But a historian at the time of the battle reported what King Henry actually said to inspire his men. The gist was, if we lose today, I don't plan on being captured. I plan on being killed. To know what that meant to the people who heard it, you have to understand that in the Middle Ages nobles were often captured in battle and held for ransom. Captured nobles weren't thrown in prison, they got to enjoy what amounted to a vacation at the enemy's court while their country scraped together the money to bail them out. As you can probably guess, common foot soldiers in a losing army didn't have that privilege. If they lost a battle, they usually lost their lives. So what King Henry actually said wasn't far from the words Shakespeare put in his mouth. The point was the same, I'm going to fight beside you and share your fate. If you think of the most inspiring, effective leaders you've worked with, I bet you'll find they have a lot in common with Henry V. Their devotion to their cause and to their team was greater than their devotion to perks and privilege. They worked and fought and struggled beside you. They endured what you endured. Think of officers sleeping on the same cold ground as their men, or employers working longer hours, traveling away from home more, shouldering responsibility, and taking blame. The idea is the same. Don't do this for me, do this with me. A leader earns devotion by showing devotion. Walker, set the example. Endure more than those you lead. Demonstrate your devotion through action. That's how you'll lead with strength. There are no ironclad laws here, and most great leaders are people of contradictions. For many in my grandparents' generation, Franklin Roosevelt was an icon of breezy confidence and effortless strength. They knew him as a smiling face on newsreels, as a confiding voice issuing from their radios for a fireside chat. But beneath the self-assured image was what the historian Gary Wills called a consummate actor. Just to appear to walk in public, Roosevelt, with his polio-stricken legs, would have to shift his weight from a cane on one side to the son who held him up on the other side. The strain always left his suit soaked with sweat, the hand on the cane shaking violently from the effort, the son's arm bruised where his fingers had dug in. And all this while he would be smiling, keeping up pleasant banter, pretending to enjoy himself. It was an excruciating ordeal turned into a pleasant stroll. The unflappable politician and the struggling polio survivor were the same person. Or take his wartime ally Winston Churchill. Churchill was a man of immense physical courage. As a young man he escaped from a POW camp in South Africa and made a 300-mile journey to safety. But he was no Spartan. He loved to eat breakfast and work in bed. He had his servants check the temperature of his hot baths with a thermometer, and he dictated much of his memoirs from the tub. Once he showed up at a friend's villa on the French rivers, without a servant, and bragged about how easy it was to travel on his own. The friend's wry response, "Winston, how brave of you." The effete aristocrat and the courageous adventurer were the same person. So there is no one list of a leader's qualities. There is no one formula for leadership. But most of the time you'll find that what we learned about leading in SEAL teams still holds. Officers eat last. Leaders lead from the front. Never ask someone to endure more than you are willing to endure yourself. It's possible to read King Henry's speech and come to the wrong conclusion. Leaders provide motivation. Sometimes. There's no question that after I get off the phone with you I feel more energized to write well. Talking with you motivates me. And the other day you wrote to me,
"Thank you for challenging me."
That's what friends do for each other. And seeing the effect that one person can have on another, some people falsely conclude that a leader's job is to supply someone else's motivation. This is the cheerleader school of leadership thought. I chant for you and cheer for you, and then you are inspired to do hard work. There's a place for chanting and a place for cheering. But nothing truly valuable, from painting a portrait to raising a child to preparing for a game, is accomplished without persistent work. And people who can perform only when they have someone chanting slogans beside them are rarely capable of such work. The reason I'm sharing this with you, Walker, is that as you work with people, veterans who are struggling, your partners in AA, families in your church, you have to understand what you can and cannot do. You can listen and counsel. You can lend ideas and hard work and home-cooked meals. You can be a friend and a fan. You can share your favorite books and fix a flat tire. You can inspire people and encourage them. You can sweat beside them and support them. But you cannot make their choices for them. You cannot take their excuses from them. You cannot make them resilient. You know the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink? It sounds like something you might have heard from your mom or dad. In fact, it's something kids have been hearing from their moms and dads for more than 800 years. In fact, it has a claim to being the oldest proverb in the English language. Here's a version from as early as 1175, Who can give water to the horse that will not drink of its own accord? It's simple. It's true. And yet, when you really, really want to help someone else, it's easy to ignore. You want to make that person drink the water. You have to remember that it's as impossible now as it has always been. As a friend, as a leader, you have to have the humility to understand that your power is limited. And just one hint about using that limited power effectively, Walker. As a young leader, I often made the mistake of trying to solve problems. If I saw something I thought was wrong, I tried to fix it. A lot of leaders do this. It makes them feel that they are serious, tackling tough problems, and needed, doing the hard work. What I learned after knocking my head against the wall 100 times is that some problems will never be fixed. Someone once asked what could be done to fix a broken community in Cambodia. Families there lived on less than $1 per day. The disabled were often viewed as a burden. Medical care was nearly non-existent, schools were unattended or too expensive, a lot of the men drank too much. And on and on. A lot of leaders begin with a mechanical mindset, find what's missing or broken and replace or repair it. But in many social systems, the trick isn't to repair what's broken, but to multiply what's working. Who has well-fed children? Who's been injured and is still working? Who lost friends and is still serving? Be a model yourself. Then promote other people who can serve as models. Through emulation and multiplication, communities can begin to heal themselves. If you can fix something that needs to be fixed, go ahead and fix it. But real leadership is most often needed where simple solutions have already been tried and have failed. When things are hard, sometimes the best thing you can do is to drown what's wrong in a sea of what's right. To inspire is to put the spirit, the breath of life, into something. To inspire is to help someone answer a simple question, why? When courses in leadership are designed, people often begin by assembling the tools and techniques that they think will lead to better organization, better communications, better collaboration. And it's true that those tools and techniques can make a difference on the margins. Too often, however, we are quick to jump to the how, instruction in the tools of management, without asking if the leader in training has the right why. Too often we put good students into leadership training because, as good students, they've demonstrated that they learn quickly. But do they have the right why? What do they want to lead for? We talked about this before in terms of your own life, Walker. If you're going to lead, it's essential that you ask it of yourself again, why? What are you leading for? What are you willing to sacrifice for? Some of the most common, and nauseating, leadership slogans: think outside the box, big, hairy, audacious goal, obscure the importance of belief and sacrifice. Do you want to lead and expect some other sucker to do the hard work? Or do you want to lead because you believe enough in something to put your comfort, your ease, even your life on the line for it? Dreams become reality through work and sacrifice. People who stoke fantasies about the way of the world often stumble and fall on first contact with reality. Other times, they confuse thinking or talking about what they want to accomplish with actually doing the work. And just as this is true of individuals, it's also true of teams, groups, communities, and countries. That's why one of the recurring themes in Marcus Aurelius' writings is, leadership's responsibility is to work intelligently with what is given and not waste time fantasizing about a world of flawless people and perfect choices. Walker, you'll be able to lead others not because you promote a fantasy about the way the world will be, but because of what you're willing to do. We are almost always better led by men and women who have been hardworking, resilient failures early in life than by those who, by dint of privilege, luck, or circumstance, rise through life without ever having put their souls into a task that tries them. We are almost always better led by those who have pushed themselves up to and past their limits than by those who don't know where their limits are. Walker, you've failed plenty. That doesn't automatically make you qualified to lead. But having failed doesn't disqualify you either. Wise people look for a history of success and failure in a leader. Find in your failures resources for your own leadership. Let them be proof that you've pushed yourself. Let them be a constant reminder of how hard it is to fight well, and of how hard you must fight when you are down. Let them be a reminder of how and where you've earned your wisdom. Beware the person who seeks to lead and has not suffered, who claims responsibility on the grounds of a spotless record. We can only be well led by those who have learned well the habits of resilience. Those habits take work, pain, and time. Resilience is a leader's defining trait, not only because the leader of any worthwhile effort will have to confront hardship and suffering, but because the character of a true leader can only be forged in the fire where resilience does its work. You speak through your actions. The vast majority of training is modeling. The vast majority of inspiration comes by example. Henry V didn't merely speak some nice words and then hide. He spoke some true words and then fought. Leadership isn't a set of techniques or tricks. Like resilience, it's a way of being. If you want to inspire devotion, be devoted. If you want to inspire belief, believe. If you want to motivate, be motivated. You can't fake any of it. If you want to lead, get yourself right first. I believe in you, friend, and I'm happy for those who will have the opportunity to follow you.